found that in the last few weeks, quite a few films have faced serious cuts, which appeared arbitrary and random, and in some cases, it was following a quote-unquote expected pattern.
Neeraj Khan's Homebound itself, which face a lot of cuts.
Because there is a clear pattern on omission of all caste references. Even films which are pivoted on caste discrimination, caste identity, like
you have to actually tell a filmmaker why a revising committee or an examining committee wants those cuts. If you are asking a filmmaker to make 120 cuts or some such figure, that means there will be nothing left of the film. Same thing with Neeraj Khan's Homebound. If you take away all the castes, the thing about caste, then what's the whole point of that film?
Under the cinematograph rules, the board is supposed to conduct at least one meeting every quarter. So even that wasn't happening for many years now, 6 years now. The last it happened in 2019, August. Also, we found that in a court submission, the board has admitted to receiving instructions from the INB ministry on how to go about a certain film.
When Prashun Joshi came into the picture, there was this feeling this is a acclaimed lyricist. He will bring in some sensibility. Board.
Yes, the previous filmmaker was laughed out of court, literally. And with Prashun Joshi's coming in, it literally felt like it was going to be something different. But it is not just more of the same. It's gone into another extreme.
The latest Express investigation involves India's entry to the Oscar this year, a film called Homebound. And it also involves the Central Film Certification Board of India. I have with me Jay Mazoomdar, who has conducted an investigation on the Film Certification Board of India, popularly known as the Censor Board. And I also have with me Shubhra Gupta, who is a former board member of the Censor Board. And this investigation involves the film that most Indians would be proud of, Homebound, which has received acclaims all over in festivals, has raised the hopes of many film critics like Shubhra, who feel that this actually might be our chance of getting some sort of Oscar recognition in the international film category. But the film, which is supposed to be releasing this week in halls across India, has faced major cuts, and so much so that the filmmakers are disillusioned, are unhappy. And this is just one of the many such cases where filmmakers have accused the board of rampant censorship. Jay, if you could tell us, what did your investigation on the censor board reveal?
So this investigation actually did not start with Homebound. We have been hearing stories, anecdotal stories mostly, about the functioning of the board for quite some time. And then some leads came our way, so we thought it's worthwhile to pursue and dig deeper. And in that process, we found that in the last few weeks, quite a few films have faced serious cuts, which appeared arbitrary and random. And in some cases, it was following a quote-unquote expected pattern. So that's one part of the investigation where we talk about individual films and how they have been treated by the board. But beyond that, in a systemic way, we found that this board has actually lapsed long back, because the board is reconstituted with a tenure of 3 years, with the premise that it will, until there is a fresh order, or is term of 3 years, whichever is earlier is the duration of the board, and it would probably take a simple notification to keep the board going, but even that did not happen. So since 2020, the last board has lapsed. We also found that under the cinematograph rules, the board is supposed to conduct at least one meeting every quarter. So even that wasn't happening for many years now, 6 years now. The last it happened in 2019, August. And also there is a clause that the board should publish annual reports and inform the government about its functioning and the status of the industry. So the last report on record on CBFC website dates back to 2016-17. So these are some systemic issues. And also we found that in a court submission, the board has admitted to receiving instructions from the INB ministry on how to go about a certain film. Maybe there are other instances, we know about only one. So that was another revelation which really undermines the board's autonomy. And then there are cases where we have found that too many films faced too many cuts.
And also, your investigation talks about how the board, especially the chairperson, seems to favor a few, right?
Shubhra would know about the process better, but briefly put, when a film comes to the board, initially a screening date is fixed when an examining committee watches the film and then gives its opinion. If that is not acceptable to the filmmaker, or if the committee itself is not in agreement, then there is a reviewing committee, a revising committee. So a board member usually heads those revising committees. Now this is a 12-member board, 2 members have expired since. So out of the 10 available members, we found out that only 2 or 3 are heading those committees, and sometimes they're being called to different cities to head such committees, even though there are local members available. So we tried to find out that why this was happening, if the local members were not available or they were not willing to head those committees, but that was not the case. So this was probably happening because there are some, again, quote unquote, convenient members of the board who would follow a certain line, and they're being handpicked to head these revising committees and others are being neglected. So altogether, it gave us a picture where the board is being run by, it's a one-man show, so to say, and most of the board members are not at all involved in the functioning of the board for quite a few years.
Absolutely. To expand on that, that part of the investigation, Jay's detailed investigation talks about the case of the Neeraj Khan's Homebound itself, which face a lot of cuts, and also during the screening committee screening, apparently. Though they were board members in Mumbai, someone from a filmmaker from Bangalore, T.S. Nagabharana, was called for a special screening, and apparently there was some sort of confrontation between Neeraj Khan and the same filmmaker. So, Shubhra, I would want to understand from you, if you could walk us through the whole process of these, these committees, and how are these screenings held, and what is the process?
Okay, so it's actually a process which has been part of the Cinematograph Act, which was constituted in 1952, back in the time when cinema was just coming into its own. A lot of that act, it's actually the focus is and has always been notionally that this is a certification board. But the problem with this is that most of the CBFC boards which have been constituted over the years have not really taken this in the letter and the spirit that it was constituted. It has suddenly, not suddenly actually, I will dial back on that. It has always been used as an instrument of censorship, which I think is really, it sort of goes against the letter and spirit of the act. It is supposed to be a certification board which should be able to assign a certification, either an adult certification or a universal certification. Universal means that anyone can see it. Adults mean that 18 and above can see it. And the category in between, the universal stroke adult, it is meant to be under adult supervision directly or indirectly. That is the broad, the spectrum of certification. And that is actually what a board should be doing. But in over the last so many years in my own stint at the board, I found that it was the whole idea of sitting on judgment in a film becomes almost like an adult telling a child that this is something that you can watch and this is not something you can watch. Now, maybe in the 50s, early 50s, when the Cinematograph Act came into being, none of the things that are obtainable today, the internet has changed the world. The social media has, in fact, taken it to so many steps further, that censorship in and of itself doesn't make any kind of sense. If someone really wants to, locate something, they can really go at it and find it from somewhere. So to have a board which puts so much emphasis on censorship as opposed to certification has always been a problem, and it appears that that problem has only intensified, rather than taking it in cognizance and trying to work around it, which is what we did in my time on the board. We tried, at least. Some of us were very, very keen that some of the way that the board functions, we should be able to streamline it. We should be able to bring it more in alignment with current, the current way things are, the way that you can find anything and everything on the net today. It makes this antediluvian, it makes this not current, it makes this feeling that it is Kafkaesque. So I think this is pretty much something that I have been hearing in the last so many years from people who were actually reporting on it on a daily basis, that things have been regressing rather than progressing.
So yeah, and you do mention, as you have mentioned in the course of this conversation too, that this is not a new thing. The governments have been accused of controlling the board repeatedly. If you could tell us about past instances too, where in different governments where instances like this have happened. I recall during the emergency, there was this film called Kissa Kursi Ka, which was very famously banned. So if you could tell us more about such
Right.
instances.
So you've taken us back to Kissa Kursika in the 70s. Then there have been numerous instances of, of board members or of actually examining committee members. Actually, let me take a moment to tell you how this whole thing functions. So it's a three-tier process whereby certification actually comes into place. There are 9 regional offices in the country, depending upon which language. So you have one in Bombay, Mumbai, which is Gujarati, Marathi, Hindi films, and then there is obviously one in Bangalore, one in Chennai, one in Kochi, and there is one in Calcutta, there is Kolkata, there is one in Guwahati. So it depends upon which language cluster the filmmaker belongs to, and that's where the film typically goes for certification once it is complete. Because without that very crucial certificate, you cannot exhibit films in any theater. Theatrical releases depend upon getting that censor certificate, right? So what happens is that if your film, say it's a Hindi film, it goes to the Mumbai regional office. The regional officer will then, the chief regional officer will then constitute a few members from the examining committee, which is basically people from within the state who understand the language, and a date will be fixed, and these members will all come into a theater where the film is screened, and a certificate at the end of it is assigned to the film. Now, if a filmmaker is not happy with the certificate, typically most filmmakers obviously want to get a universal certificate, because that means that the film can then go on to to satellite channels, which is another revenue stream, or onto Doordarshan, or onto any other streaming platform. And that is absolutely necessary. Now streaming has been brought into under the ambit of this censorship kind of a thing. So unless you have that certificate, it becomes very difficult for a filmmaker to go out there and show the film in theaters, which is actually what it is expected to do. So when a filmmaker is unhappy with this, with the kind of ruling, then they can actually the examining committee has another level called the revising committee, which is what Jay was talking about, which is on that, a board member has to be mandatorily present, which is where people like us who happen to be on the board during that time are then called. And as to people from other states and other cities being called, sometimes in my own time I saw that happen. In fact, I stepped into a Mumbai screening because nobody was available. The 4 or 5 members in Bombay were not either present in town or they were not available. So we do, I mean, board members do step in, but the revising committee had another level, which was called the FCAT, which is the Film Appellate Tribunal, the which that body has been in 2021 been abolished.
Abolished, yes.
Which means, yes, which is actually, it was a real blow to the filmmakers, because now what happens is, even if the revising committee also doesn't sort of stump up and come up to their expectations, a filmmaker has to go straight to High Court, which is something that most filmmakers are understandably wary of, because in courts it becomes it's long drawn, it's expensive, and as it is, filmmaking is an expensive business. So that one very crucial layer was taken away in 2021 during this regime. So I feel that now where the certification board is right now, it's becoming even more opaque, its doings, because nothing is available on the website. As Jay was saying, whatever meetings and the outcome of it used to be available, it used to be supposed to be in public domain. I remember some of us talking about how the number of cuts should be available on the website, so that anyone in the public domain can actually take a look at those cuts and see what happened at which point of time in the film, and you have to also give a reason. Now I think there's been a major dialing back on all of those things that we had tried to do in terms of transparency, in terms of being able to make the public understand what this whole process is.
Yes, in fact, Jed does talk about the arbitrary nature of this opacity. Jed, I would want you to talk about, the filmmakers you spoke to. It's not just Neeraj Khan's film which was subjected to such cuts. You also spoke to the makers of Punjab 90, the Honey Tehran film, right? And if you could tell us, like, as you mentioned, there is a sense of quiet, like storm in the industry. If you could tell us more about that.
It's a little ironic that the only film you mentioned is Kissa Kutsi Ka, which was during emergency, and we are right now in so-called peacetime. So the excesses were probably expected then, but if we are facing the same situation 50 years later, and it's 70 years since the act was put in place, and the audience maturity is expected to have grown, and still the kind of censorship we see, and this passage from censorship to certification, which was the essence of the act, probably in the beginning. And after Shyam Benegal committee was formed in 2016, that was the roadmap given to the government, that they should move from censorship to certification and leave it to the audience wisdom and judgment. But that didn't happen, and the result is this film you mentioned. I spoke to Trehan, and for 3 years now, that film is hanging fire, and they did not agree to the cuts by the examining committee, then by the revising committee. I think multiple revising committees were set up. Then they went to the court, and then I'm told that they had a favorable hearing, and then they were forced to withdraw the case. And even now, the film's future is uncertain because the director has refused to comply with so many cuts ordered. So in such a situation, the issue is that for a producer, I mean, who is a big-time commercial producer who has probably at any given point of time 5, 10, 15 films going. So it becomes probably difficult for him to fight beyond the point for an individual film because there is a lot at stake. So when I was doing the reporting also, it was very difficult to get people to talk. Some refused to talk at all. Some refused to talk on record. And this disquiet is very much there. But given the way things are, not many are forthcoming. But some of them opened up off record and they shared the way things are going. And some of them also mentioned that some of the cuts mentioned imposed on them, they would not really follow any political or ideological line as such. So they're also fixed that why they're being told to do what they're being told to do. But some patterns evolved because there is a clear pattern on omission of all caste references. Even films which are pivoted on caste discrimination, caste identity, like Phule or Punjab 95, even this film, Homebound. Caste is
you mentioned Dhadak too also, yeah.
Yeah, very major theme in the film. So if from that film you take away all caste references, or for example, a film on Punjab, if that doesn't mention Punjab police or the state's name, or many such references, if they have to cut, then it loses its. I mean, you have to root a film in the context. So if you take away all that, then it takes away the age clearly.
Yeah, what Jay, you were saying about you take away the essence of a film, which is exactly what happens when all these arbitrary, random cuts, which are forced upon a filmmaker. And as you said, I've also spoken to Hani Trehan a couple of times when I saw the film in Cannes when he screened it on the sidelines, and the film literally there is nothing that I could see which is a problem for it. It was a Congress. It was not even this government. It was under a different government that happened. Those excesses happened, but for some reason that the filmmaker has not even been told. He's The thing with this is that you have to actually tell a filmmaker why a revising committee or an examining committee wants those cuts. They have never been explicit about the reason as to why these cuts need to be put into place. And if you logically think of it, if you are asking a filmmaker to make 120 cuts or some such figure, that means there will be nothing left of the film. They don't even want the film to be called Punjab 95. They want it to be called Satluj, which the filmmaker says makes no kind of, I mean, it's become so generic that the specificity of the film, the time, all of that goes away. Same thing with Neeraj Ghewan's Homebound. If you take away all the castes, the thing about caste, then what's the whole point of that film? Which is about minority, living in this country. If you're a minority or if you're of the lower caste, how does your experience of living, it is experienced by a filmmaker if you're going to take that out? In my own, I remember back in the day when Prakash Jahaz Apharan was also is also about caste, where it was not this government, another government was in place, but they also said no, you cannot use this word. So, because if you use this word, then it is casteist. In fact, it makes no kind of sense to say that if you use that word, it becomes casteist. It's only if the filmmaker is allowed. Let's say allowed is not even a word that it should not even be in play in a democracy, literally. But this is where it's come to. Unless a filmmaker is allowed to use those phrases, how is he or she going to address it? How is he or she going to say that, look, this is something that is not the right thing? Shazia Iqbal's Dhadak 2, which was earlier this year, which is also on caste, also faced so many problems in terms of the cuts that were asked. So much of the soul of the film gets butchered. So I don't understand how filmmakers can actually function in a place where everything is so Machiavellian, everything feels that it is not, it is not not being a favorable climate for a filmmaker to both make the film as well as have it out for people like us to watch needs a certain kind of sensibility, which is what the CBFC is meant to do. Because back in the day, in 1952, in the 50s, in the 60s, you could have said, yes, the general public may not understand what the filmmaker is trying to do. So therefore, we need to, intervene at that point. But now with in 2025, to have people sit upon judgment, both the film as well as the viewer, because they are actually depriving the viewer from exercising their own judgment. If somebody is over 18, you can vote, you can get married, you can do so many things. Then why should a person over 18 be told what they can watch and what they cannot watch, right? It depends. You are then infantilizing an audience. So that makes no kind of sense at all.
Jay, I would also want you to talk about, your conversations with other board members who, on conditions of anonymity, spoke to you and expressed their disillusionment with the way things are functioning right now. So if you could tell us more about that.
So they were not involved at all. I mean, none of them, that those who spoke to me, they had no involvement. They did not know what's happening in the board for quite some time. Not to mention about the day-to-day activities, but they didn't even know the trajectory it's taking and the way the board is making its decisions. They had no clue about that. So the one thing they all emphasized is that the filmmakers need an appeal mechanism. That's very important. The legal option cannot be the default option after the revising committee decision. So that's one. And number two is that if we go for a real certification regime where you can have many more categories. Now, of course, the board, the act has been changed 2 years, 3 years back, and now we have these subcategories of UA 16, UA 14, and such. But if we do that and then just leave it at that and let the audience decide, that would be a much better way to go, they feel. And thirdly, they also, some of them told me that they want members from other sections of the society, not only those who are in the film industry, but a wider participation would be helpful if we want to really bring a diverse set of sensibilities to it, who would understand and react differently. So these are the few things they are looking at, but this present board is serving, it's been the longest serving board, 8 years, I think. Previously, the longest serving chairpersons were, I think, Sharmila Tagore and Shakti Samant. They were there for 7 years. Now, Prasanna Joshi is there for 8 years. So, and the board is not functioning for at least 6 years. So these are the two key points they had, that they want a new board, and they want the rules and the direction of the board's decision making to be more practical and audience friendly.
Now, Shubhra, coming to
Yeah.
Prasun Joshi, when he came after the reign of Pehlaj Nehlani, which I remember, Pehlaj Nehlani was, internet's favorite, punching bag. They used to, I remember gifs being made of him and his arbitrary decisions and stuff. But when Prasun Joshi came into the picture, there was this feeling that, this is a acclaimed lyricist. He will bring in some sensibility, certain kind of sensibility to the board. So what went wrong, do you feel?
I can only speculate, and because there is nothing on record about any kind of conversations with the chairperson. But there could have been two reasons for this. One is that a chairperson's own way of looking at the world sometimes does come into play when you're looking at what should be allowed and what should not be allowed. Or the other thing could be, which is something that the board has always been saying, has been denying, that there is any kind of interference from the government. And it is instituted under the Information and Broadcasting Ministry, but it is an autonomous body. That is what it is on paper. But how much of it actually, actually comes into being, we have zero idea, because there is really there is literally nothing that we get from the board about the way it functions, about why it thinks a certain way about a film. So yes, the previous filmmaker was laughed out of court, literally, and with Prashun Joshi's coming in, it literally felt like it was going to be something different. But it is not just more of the same. It's gone into another extreme where you from what Jay says, that the board itself is practically, it's sort of
defunct.
comatose. It's not functioning at all in the way it should be, because it's not just the meetings. You have to have that quarterly meetings are legally bound. You have to, a board has to have those meetings in place at least three times a year. If those meetings haven't happened, then how is the board even in play? That's a question that anyone can ask. When there were films like, say, for example, Gulzar's Andhi, that was also back in the day when everyone got really twisted out of shape about saying that, oh, it is meant to be an Indira Gandhi-like figure. But the film really, it got past all of that stuff because the filmmaker was given a chance to actually put up their case and speak about why they had a certain kind of vision in mind. Like Shekhar Kapoor's Bandit Queen was also a lot of it was supposed to be not for public, because it would, that film Poolan Devi is from the lower caste, and there was a great deal of furor around it. He went to Supreme Court. The producer backed him and said that he will not cut a single frame. So apparently, this is just a little before my time in terms of, I saw the film, of course, where minimal cuts. There were just a few, I think, voice cuts that were made. This is the way to actually have an interaction between the filmmaker and the people who are giving the certification, or let's say not even giving it, but providing the certification, sort of, so that everybody can work in tandem. That is why this whole process has been made to be such an integral part of the filmmaking thing. But if you're going to be like, if, for example, let me also bring up Anurag Kashyap's Black Friday. That film was under the scanner for almost so many years. He showed those films. He showed that films to film to us in screenings, because at that time you could do those things, and literally there was nothing in the film that was a problem. But he won that case. And he won that. That film came into being, and it is really one of the best film that he's done. In fact, talking of Kashyap, he is the only one, I think, who has actually been vocal about the fact that here censorship and filmmaking really don't go hand in hand. And if you want to put this thing as a hammer, or as a sort of a thing on top of a filmmaker's head, how is any kind of creativity going to flower? This is a question that we really need to be asking very seriously, in especially in today's age. How, if somebody is saying no, how is it going to be something that a filmmaker will be able to show their vision to people like us who are sitting there wanting to see something fresh, something creative, something that is pushing the envelope, something that is making us think? How?
On that somber note, we have to put an end to this conversation because both of you are busy journalists and have other things to attend to, and we are running out of time. Thank you, Jay, for this amazing investigation. Please do read the full investigation in our website, the indianexpress.com. Thank you, Shubhra, for walking us through the whole process. Thank you.